Welcome to our 7th episode of Community Corner, where United Way connects with local partners, agencies, and people who live right here to showcase the power of community. During this series of shows, you will also hear from inspiring individuals who have had to overcome incredible barriers, and from those who are driving positive change in community. Our community is facing many issues, including poverty, mental illness, lack of youth supports, senior isolation, domestic violence, among so many others. And this community has made great strides and demonstrated its commitment to those who are struggling. Everything about this show is local, and we call that local love. So I would like to introduce you to two individuals who are significant contributors to United Way and to this community. We have Ryan Packer here. Ryan is our campaign cabinet chair this year, and he is also the Vice President, Canadian Commercial Banking at BMO Financial. We're also joined here with Fred, an individual who has used United Way supported programs in the past, and he is here to also share his story. So welcome to both of you.
Thank
so
you
nice
very
to
much.
have you here.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So Ryan, you know, we're seeing a lot happening right now in the community, and just wanted to ask you, what do you think the future holds for this community, and taking into consideration the challenges that we face?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for having me here, first and foremost. You know, it's uncertain. It's hard to know. Nobody, I think, really knows exactly what's in store. I think we're all kind of out there looking to try and figure out what has to happen next. I can say, though, that organizations like United Way have been there for decades supporting folks who need help when they need it. And right now, as we speak, you know, there are over 200,000 people in this community. They're looking for guidance, looking for support, and using local programs to help them get through challenges they're facing. As we go through the year ahead and we start looking at beyond that, there's a lot of challenges that will come, some that we can foresee, some that we cannot. We've seen the local environment changing dramatically over the past couple of weeks and months. You see economic instability, you've seen rising inflation, you see interest costs, you see food costs, you see lots of things changing. And from that perspective, I think that's unknown where that's all going to go, quite frankly. And for those who are already in a challenged position, this only makes that tougher to find that spot where they have basic needs met, let alone thriving. But that said, I'm also positive. Like, I do believe as a community, we lift one another up, we stand together, we pull each other up. And I think we've done that in the past, and we'll continue to do it again. And so for those reasons, I think there's lots of opportunity and lots of reasons to be excited about where we're headed. But, you know, like I said earlier, I think organizations like United Way that are out there making a difference truly give people the opportunity to find balance and participate in our community the way we all want to.
It's very interesting how you mentioned all of those challenges, and I think what we're really going to see in the short term is that many more people will require many different supports, and that's why this, what we call the network of supports, is so important, because issues are complex, and when an individual or a household comes forward for food, they may also require additional support. So that's why we have, you know, 150 different programs that United Way invests in, so that we can look at these issues holistically. Fred, you have an incredible story. And I'm wondering, first of all, thank you for having that courage to come forward to tell the story. But
you couldn't pay me enough to not come here and this. This is the most important message you can get out into the community, for me anyway. 13 years ago, you could have asked me, am I going to be sitting here right now? I would have laughed at you and said, I'll be lucky if I'm not in the ground. The community as a whole is crying for the help that United Way puts out, especially for addiction and mental health. Those are the two biggest ones I see so many issues with nowadays. I have friends that are recovering addicts. I have friends that are screaming to get into services for mental health because this pandemic has hurt them drastically, because they feel even more isolated now than they ever have. My stuff, my story began 13 and a half years ago when I hit the wall. You know, I was an addict. I was using daily. I hit the wall at 100 miles an hour. I lost everything. And you know what? I actually thanked the cops when they arrested me, because now it could stop, now it could change. And I started the process of getting clean. I sat in the Ontario Treatment Addiction Center's program for methadone, and I was sitting there one day and I was on the phone with a friend of mine and I was telling them, I'm losing everything, I'm screwed, you know, I might as well just die. And the girl that was sitting across the way from me says, why don't you reach out to the United Way? I went, United Way? All I think of United Way at that point in time was a clothing store where you could get, you know, recycled clothes that was affordable to help. And they said, no, there's so much more. And I went, oh, okay. So I started doing some research and I made a few phone calls. The connections into United Way got me into the John Howard Society to help me get a job. They got me into alcohol, drugs, and gambling to get me counseling, to help get me to rehab. And I wound up in a rehab for 3 weeks, and that rehab was probably the most life-changing thing that ever happened for me. I walked in there, they asked me a question. So what's wrong with you, Fred? I said, oh, nothing. And then he says, what brought you here? What was the key thing that brought you here? And I started speaking. And an hour and a half later, I walked out and went, wow, I feel great. The shoulders had been lifted, the weight. And I've never relapsed. I'm one of the fortunate few that I know that has been addicted as bad as I was, that has never relapsed. Methadone was a textbook program for me. 2 years, 7 months, 13 days. Walked in, walked out, and I've never looked back. I've gone back several times to give them the good news, give them the updates of what I'm doing in my life. That I got remarried, that I bought a farm. You know, there were so many things that have happened in that last 13 and a half years for me. My life was changed, and it wasn't changed by my hands alone. The hands of the United Way were huge for me. Those fingers, those networks that are out there, there's too many to list, but those programs are necessary for all of us. And it's literally one issue away for any of us to need that help.
Wow.
A lot of people are living on the edge for sure, and I'm wondering, Fred, if you can just share a little bit about like the toll, like you go into some of the details about the toll it took and the cost it took.
Health issues alone, wow. I've had more health issues than I can shake a stick at, but I'm healthier by the day. Losing a house, losing my kids, that was probably the hardest thing. I didn't see my kids for 7 years because my ex didn't want them around an addict. 7 years of not watching my daughters and my sons grow up, that was hard. That was really hard. That was a rude awakening of how far I had fallen. And then I met a girl at a waterfall. Of all places.
A classic love story.
There you go.
Sherman Falls. Funny enough, Sherman Falls. I was working for Chris Eklund, who had founded the Canadian Heroes organization and the City of Hamilton City of Waterfalls. And I was illuminating Sherman Falls. And she was sitting up on this rock where I wanted to put one of my lights. And I looked up and I went, oh, wow. And there was that light, you know. And she happened to do the same thing. And we started talking, and well, a few months later, I asked her if she was single. She answered yes, and I was like, yes. So we went out for a waterfall walk, coincidentally enough, another one, and we had a wonderful walk, and I told her everything, the addictions, the charges, the loss of my kids, everything. I dropped everything on her, because I knew she was that one. She was the one that had to be in my life. And she asked me at the end of the walk, why did you tell me all that? And I said, because I'd rather have you walk now than when you already have my heart more in your hands. And she says, I'm going to challenge you to be a better person. And I said, I hope so. And she goes, do you see me going anywhere? I said, no. She gave me a kiss, and that was our first kiss. And we've been together almost 11 years.
There you go. There you go. Well done.
So, but the toll on the family, the family toll, that's a completely different monster. It's the dynamic changes. Most people that are in the situation I was, they don't have the support I lucked out to have. My family was there. They supported me in telling me I could do it. They didn't financially support me because I didn't want that. They helped out when they could, when I was really desperate. But I didn't want them to pay for anything. I wanted to earn that back. I had burned a lot of bridges, and luckily enough, I've repaired those. Work issues, hard part to find a job when you have a criminal record. But what led me to getting into with the United Way and being able to tell my story was a company called Hadrian Manufacturing in Burlington. They gave me a shot. They believe in second chances. And that first year I wanted to donate, and they kept asking me why. And I explained my story thinking, well, I'm either going to get hired or I'm going to get fired. Well, I lucked out. They hired me, and I was able to donate that first year. And that led to my getting asked why I donated so much. And the story got told, and it got passed on. And then I got asked to be an impact speaker. And I was very happily a yes. I wanted to be able to share my story, what the United Way had done just to get me to where I was, let alone continue to do. I mean, I'm now, 6 years working with you guys, I think it is?
It's been,
it's been a long time, but I'll continue to do it until I'm not needed anymore, but I highly doubt that'll happen.
Always needed.
And I'm actually floored that I was able to speak at so many different places and create such an impact to let people know that the services that they donate and help with do work.
Yeah.
That there is hope for anyone out there. The services are there. You just got to look for them. They're there to help and get you to continue.
Yeah, I really like that term hope. And you mentioned multiple services, and you know, Ryan, when we think about this network of support and working together, it takes a collective effort. And from your perspective, you're leading this year's campaign as a community volunteer. Tell us about the importance of working together.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Fred just did a great job of talking about, quite frankly, how important it is. I mean, the collective scale of challenges, it's exhaustive. Like, it goes and it goes and it goes. But through partnership, either whether it be local citizens, whether it be volunteers, whether it be people who benefit from services, whoever it is, coming together gives us a collective way of looking at a problem differently than it would if it came from a single lens. So it brings perspective, it brings philosophy, and it brings hard work. And the people that are willing to put the work in and lift each other up make a true difference. I mean, Fred, you spoke clearly of this idea, and Brenda, you alluded to earlier, this idea that, it's not a single service that people need. They often need more than one. You come in perhaps for a specific requirement or something that you need in your life, and fortunately that hand is there with United Way and other organizations and the agencies that they support are there to help you from the first step. But then the next step comes, and then you realize, okay, there are more pieces to the puzzle. From that perspective, I think it's super important that people understand, first and foremost, not only that knowing there's a vast need, which I think is first and foremost paramount that people grasp that, but secondly, that they understand the scale of what these agencies do in our community, and by better understanding people who benefit from it and those stories that people like yourself tell, Fred, how valuable they are, I think it just brings us all together collectively. But understanding impact is really important, and I think in so many cases you hear, you may hear a story, or everybody knows United Way. Quite frankly, like, it's a very well-known name, but does everybody understand how it impacts your community?
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
I didn't.
No, many don't. I wouldn't
it.
have. Quite frankly, I wouldn't either. And I would encourage anyone listening or watching the show right now to take a chance, go onto the United Way local website, and view the impact report. The impact report, quite frankly, changes the way you see an organization, which is a name and a staple and something you would have heard of about or perhaps not been as closely engaged with, to really understanding what it is that they do, how it impacts folks' lives who really, really do need help, and understanding that the need is much larger than you probably appreciate. And I don't want to judge folks for thinking that, because I didn't grasp it. But then understanding how they can make an impact and truly collectively coming together as a group, it only makes it that much easier.
I really appreciated the term impact, So what United Way does really well is impact investing. That's the term that we use, and it's measured by many different markers and indicators. We're just going to take a little break here, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Community Corner. I am joined here with Fred and Ryan Packer. And Fred, just before we took a break, you were telling us about your journey, and I'm wondering if you could share a little bit more about how it came to be and the impact and toll it took.
Now, I was, I had a tattoo studio. I am an artist, and you get into a little bit of a lifestyle of partying a little bit here and there. And at the height of my addiction, I was spending about $1,500 a day. It was ridiculous sums of money. At first, it was only a couple $100 here, a couple $100 there, and you chase that same high. You chase that very first high that you had. And being addicted to oxys, there's two different sort of types in there. There's the sort of vegetable, and then you have the mode I got, which was like Superman. I felt like $1 million, so I chased that high. And at the height, I went from spending very little to $1,500 a day real quick. And that's where I sat for the longest time until it all came to a crashing end. It was, to look back, it was probably $500,000 I spent on drugs in 2.5 years.
Wow. Yeah, like I'm in awe of it. I quite frankly, like I don't know how people can manage through it. So kudos to you for being here. I mean, quite frankly, and great that you got the support and found people willing to help and then stuck to it yourself. Like it takes a lot of intestinal fortitude to be able to, one, ask for help, accept the help, and then take the responsibility and do what you can do. But know that there are hands out there that'll help you when you need it. And I think kudos to you, Fred. I'm really impressed, and thanks for sharing.
It is very much you have to be willing to humble yourself and take the help. It's there. Use it. If you want to be a better version of your former self, you will need the help to step up and do it. You can't do it on your own. The systems are there for you to help. And once you make that first step, it gets easier every day.
And here now you're giving back.
Yeah.
Nice.
So there you go, right?
Wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
Wholeheartedly.
As you receive, then you give. Like that's fantastic. What a great role model. Well done.
And such an inspiration. Your strength is such an inspiration. Thank you so much, Fred and Ryan, for joining us here today. And as we wrap up this segment of the show, we're going to move into a local performance. Everything about this show is local. We call it Local Love, and we hope you enjoy this local artist.
Ambition just keeps blowing in the breeze, so I'm chased, I'm letting go. And maybe in a year or two is way too far to see, so I'm chased, never home, never home. And I've been getting inside. Times before, 'cause I know that feeling's gone away, but I'm just making sure, 'cause we both still got the records we used to play together.
Well, we hope that you enjoyed that performance from our local artist as much as we did.
Brenda, can I interject for 1 second before we wrap here? During the break there, Fred and I actually are having a conversation. I was interested in asking him a little bit about how he commenced, I guess, the journey into the challenging part of his life. And I think it'd be really beneficial for people to hear just how quickly things changed for someone, and to put it into context for folks who maybe haven't had this type of experience but can relate to it. So maybe, Fred, can you just tell a little bit about it?
For sure. The first time I used, well, obviously, like, people have recreational fun. Then you get into where that changes into an addiction. And the first time was actually where I became a full addict and addicted, was using my pain meds. And it wasn't using them properly, it was using them in the wrong way. I smoked my first pill, and it was one of my pain meds, and that smoking that first pill was the addicting part. It was euphoria, it was honey melting on my brain, and everything went downhill from there.
And up until that point, you had a
Perfectly life. I had the cars, I had a wife, I had kids, I had the house, I had a successful business. I worked 3 different jobs because I loved working. And I tossed that all away just for a high. And it's funny because Brenda's heard me say this line several times, and it's true. If my story helps one person, then all the hell I've been through is worth it. And that's what it comes down to. For me to tell my story, to help someone, makes it worth it.
Well, listen, thank you so much, Fred, for sharing your raw story with us. And Ryan, thank you so much for being here with us today and for leading our campaign as the cabinet chair for this year's campaign. So, and thank you for spending some time with us. We are truly stronger together. And you can find out more information by visiting the website uwhh.ca.